And all right, we're back on the final hour or so-ish of CrossWit on this Friday. And when we left you guys a little bit ago before our break, we were talking about the creepiest movies, and we were getting input from Greg on what were we talking about? I forgot exactly where we're at. I know what I was about.
You were talking. Well, you were talking about Blair Witch Project.
Yeah. Okay. So I think what I was saying is when I went to watch the Blair Witch Project, not knowing if it was real or not, you know, and looking at it from my perspective, I was like, what is this movie about? It's not even scary. It's about these kids that got lost in the woods because they're too stupid to keep up with their compass, and they're walking in circles, and they're going the wrong direction, and whatever these people who live in the woods are, I'm assuming they're like inbred, whatever they are, they're in the center of the woods, and they're trying to scare these dudes off. They're leaving them stick people signs, and they're shaking their tents, and they're just not taking a hint. And they just won't go away, and eventually they keep walking in circles until they wind up at the house and they get killed. And I'm not sure if I'm getting the Blair Witch old one or there's been 3 of them. Did you know that?
I've only seen the first one. You can only make that movie once.
Well, watch this. The first one they made twice. They made it then, and then they made it like a couple years ago. But then there was actually a second one.
There was a sequel. I remember it.
There was a second one that came out a couple years after the original one. It wasn't done from that perspective.
Yeah, like, it wasn't a found footage.
It wasn't a fakeomentary.
Right.
It was like an actual movie,
right.
But it kind of it sought to explain a different version of what. I don't really even understand how it tied in.
Yeah.
But were you going to go talk about that?
Well, I wanted to mention that the reason that a movie like that can only be made once is that there's an interesting story. The movie, I think, was made by kids that were at the University of Florida. And they hired the actors from the University of Florida. They said, we got this really cool project we want to do, Blair Witch Project. We're going to take you up to, I think it was filmed in Maryland maybe, or, you know. And what they did is they let the actors in on some of what was actually going to happen. But when they began filming, they had a handheld camera and they had the video thing, right? Okay. And so every day they would give each of the actors a cylinder that had their instructions for what they were supposed to do that day, but they were instructed not to tell the other actors what their parts were. So all of them knew what they were supposed to be talking about. None of it was scripted. It was all sort of freelance, like we're doing today, right? And then they would tell them, what we want you to do is they give them coordinates. They say, we want you to film and walk and do your parts from here to point, B.
1 second, not to interrupt you. Are we live over there? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not getting it. I was just making sure I wouldn't. Hold on, okay, I see why I wouldn't clicked on the right thing. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I want to make sure I could see what people are, okay, I think I'm good now. All right, go ahead.
So basically what the director did is he'd say, all right, we'll meet you up there. You guys should get there around 3 p.m. We'll take a break. We'll talk about how things went. We'll do some refilming if we need to. We'll have lunch, and then we'll do the next part. And, well, they lied to him. And so they get to point B, and nobody was there. There's no food. There's no tents. There's no nothings. And they started. So a lot of what you see on screen in the original Blair Witch Project is actual freaking out by people who think they're really lost in the woods because they are. They didn't tell them. They kept them blind the whole time, and so as the movie goes on, a lot of that psychological stress that's filmed,
real.
The French call this cinema verite, right? But think of it ethically. They're lying to these kids, right? And so these kids didn't know that what they were filming, and then so every once in a while they give them relief. They'd find them and they'd say, "Oh no, you guys took a wrong turn. We're really sorry that you didn't." So they're hungry, they're cold, they're and then the stick things start showing up, and they didn't tell them about that either.
Right. And
the noises out in the woods, in the middle of the woods, are happening at times when, it's been 3 hours, they were supposed to meet us, and we're not, you know what I mean? And they're not here. And so a lot of that stuff is really actual, I think I would have probably killed them if they did that to me.
Well, we went to, if there's any of my buddies, Lane, if any of you guys remember this from Okinawa, from the Jungle Warfare Training Center, if you guys remember this, please comment in on this, because I don't. But we went there, and I can't remember. I'm trying to think. Terry's in Iraq. He would remember. I don't know who else would be on this that might be remembering. But we were in the Jungle Warfare Training Center, and we were doing some patrols and stuff, and we found a village that it was just a training village. I mean, it'd been there the entire time. But the Blair Witch Project was real big, and I think we were probably lost.
Right.
because back then we didn't have, there was GPSs were non-existent, and this jungle, I don't think it was triple canopy, but it was probably pretty thick. It was pretty thick at points. I don't know how good a GPS would have worked in some of the areas, but we were patrolling and we stumbled up on this village, and whether we were way off course or it wasn't, they didn't brief us that it was there. It wouldn't have been on the maps. The maps we were using were called 1 in 50,000, which really means 1 inch in real life is 50,000 inches.
Okay.
Or 50,000 inches is 1 inch. So the maps, are designed basically for pilots.
Right.
Not really to land nav, because in other fields we land nav on like a 1 in 10,000 or something like that, or even more detailed. So the village wouldn't have necessarily been on the map anyway. But when we found it, it was like everyone was going, man, everybody's like, this village is, this is not supposed to be here, dude. And then someone had been there before us and apparently had thought the same thing, because they took, and it was, I don't know if it was one of the other squads or platoons, but they took sticks and they made the stick figures from Blair Witch and they put them everywhere. And it was like, we're like, whoa, not only is this weird, like somebody else thought it was weird too.
Yeah.
Now, and I don't know if that was another squad or if it was someone that died out there, but anyway.
No, and I didn't mean to imply that I didn't enjoy Blair Witch Project. I did. I thought it was quite entertaining. I had some friends that went to it and had to leave the theater because they got vertigo.
Really?
And one guy threw up just from the handheld and he couldn't. He said I had to leave, and it wasn't that I was too scared, but
Well, have you seen? Have you ever seen The Fourth Kind? I know I asked you about that. Or sent that. Have you seen this?
I don't think so.
Oh man. Okay. So you've seen The Fourth Kind, Matt? Have you? Okay. The Fourth Kind is, in my opinion, the most underrated. It's the only movie that ever freaked me out. Okay. Oh. The Exorcist didn't freak me out. Of course, I watched The Exorcist, later in life and after its heyday. But The Fourth Kind is. I'm some reason I'm behind on my feed over here. I can't seem to get caught up, but as long as we're going there, I don't care. All right, so The Fourth Kind is it's really cool, because what the company did, who made it, was they were trying to perpetuate this. They were trying to beat the Blair Witch, basically. Right. So they didn't just make a fake-umentary. They made a documentary, and before it was released, they created a fake website. Mm-hmm. And they made fake news and articles and stuff like that about it, so that when you watched the movie and you went back to look at it, then you would be like,
wait, did they film this in Alaska, or did it take place? Okay, so I did hear about it. I never saw it.
Okay, yeah.
But didn't they have to retract some of the stuff? They got in trouble?
They I'm sure they did, because they didn't just... This was so off this was crazy. I believe this movie was real for like 6 years because it was like no one watched it. Yeah. So there wasn't a whole lot of hype behind it. You had to research it to find out it was real, and then you had to research further to find out it was fake. So when I watched this movie, before I tell you what it's about, they did other crazy things, like there would be certain scenes. There was a scene where this guy who was mentally just traumatized by the events supposedly he went through in the movie, that he killed himself. Well, when you watch that scene in the movie, they don't just show you that scene. They split the screen and they show you the actors in the movie acting out, and then they allegedly show you the real scene from a police car camera.
That's pretty clever.
It's pretty clever. Yeah. So you're watching this movie and you're going, and they do it side by side. Yeah. So you're watching the actors, and then you're allegedly watching the real people, and you're going, whoa, this is crazy. And it's like that throughout things. So anytime there's a real crazy scene, then they do that and they play this off of you. But what the movie is essentially about, and this was before, I guess, if you're really into this type of stuff and you get into the whole paranormal, aliens and other entities, right. Physical, non-physical, that stuff, ancient alien type of stuff, then this is probably, they were doing this before that was cool.
Right.
So in this movie, it's about a psychiatrist who is like a hypnotherapist, and they are investigating people who have been allegedly abducted by aliens. Okay. So it's the whole hypnotherapy thing.
Right.
But in the end of it, where it ends up is that the people who are abducted by aliens are not just abducted by aliens; they're possessed by them. So these aliens are not just aliens; they're like demons.
Right.
And the big surprise, or the big ending, is that they're doing this. They're doing this interview, and these people start to kind of wig out or whatever, and the girl is talking to the alien through the person like it's a demon, and it identifies itself as like I'm an ancient Babylonian. I'm not a Babylonian, but like what were back in the Bible, like the old prophets were always fighting with I don't know, one of those gods like Baal or something.
Right.
And and it identifies itself. But the movie, man, when I watched that movie, I told so many people that this really happened.
Yeah.
I mean, they got me. But in the one scene though that really I was like, how did we not know about this if it happened?
Yeah.
Because the people disappear. Like some people disappear in a movie and it writes them off that in Alaska people disappear all the time.
Yeah.
Which is actually true.
That's true. Yeah. That's what
Well, there's one scene in this movie where before the people disappeared, like there's a cop and it's from his car camera, and it shows the top of the house and you can actually see something float above the house.
Right.
And I was like,
whoa. Yeah.
yeah, because I'm a firm believer in, I used to watch Ghost Hunters.
Right.
And the problem I have with Ghost Hunters and all these stupid shows like that is that I don't want to see what may be.
Yeah.
I want you to show me something that either has to be true or it has to be a hoax.
Yeah.
I don't want to, don't show me a spot floating in the camera. I want to see, like, there's one episode in Ghost Hunters where the girl was laying in bed and the sheet went.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's either a hoax or that's real. There's no in between.
Right.
So anyway, that's the fourth kind. I didn't know if you'd seen that. So
Well, that's interesting, and it does bring up, both Blair Witch and the fourth kind bring up that sort of the planting of evidence that then will make things seem real. And Umberto Eco did it in Foucault's Pendulum, and we mentioned Dan Brown earlier. That story was generated by a 19th century French scholar who forged a document and planted it in a library in Paris to prove that he was related to Jesus Christ.
That's how the whole...
what he did is he forged the document, he planted it in the library, and then he waited like 4.5 years, and he discovered it.
Right.
It was authenticated. So what's interesting is...
Priory of Zion.
Huh?
The Priory of Zion. That's how he created it,
Yeah,
didn't he?
and so there is a whole bunch of scholarship on that's actually real scholarship because everybody thought it was real, and then they did some testing on the ink like 60 years later, and they were like, no, this is a fake document. So that real scholarship... That's where the idea for the Da Vinci Code, I think, came from.
Yeah.
Umberto Eco was definitely aware of it and used that sleight of hand in his own book. I'm kind of using it in my book to the opposite effect. But back to the horror films, I think one of the things that you ever notice how the different types of genres all come out in clusters?
Yes. Yeah.
And so I did a talk a few years ago that I entitled Our Monsters Ourselves, because I teach film. And I did a hop, skip, and a jump through the different types of horror films that have been done. Because to me, they're always these reflections of a collective anxiety for a generation. Or you can read through them, even the bad ones. That's why I love film so much. I love bad films. I love good films. I don't like truly bad films, but like
Ash versus Evil bad.
Well, not, the ones that become sort of those cult classics are great.
Yeah.
But for instance, it should be no surprise to us that in the 17th century, Mary Shelley and Percy Bysshe Shelley and George Gordon, Lord Byron, these poets, they go off to a summer vacation somewhere in Austria or Switzerland, and Byron comes up with the idea that they should all create their own ghost stories. And Mary Shelley's the only one that actually wrote her story, and it turned into the story of Frankenstein, right?
Right.
None of the other ones ever finished any. And you look at what's going on in the world at that time, and the fact that she wrote a story about the reanimation of a corpse, a put-together corpse, makes total sense because Volta had just discovered that if you put an electric current on the leg of a dead frog, it can make the leg twitch. So we just discovered that electricity and light seem to be intimately bound together, right?
Right.
And so to me, Mary Shelley's there's a dark side to that, right? The dark side, and Crichton was always writing about this, is, well, what are the consequences of this? So, for instance, it shouldn't surprise us that after World War II, Japan made a whole bunch of Godzilla movies.
Yeah.
Because they're rooted in that fear that releasing atomic energy into the world is gonna have these consequences that we cannot possibly predict, and that's what every Michael Crichton book is kind of about.
Right.
So when you get to the I just showed Psycho in my film class, and Psycho is such an important part of American film culture and pop culture that people walk around sort of under the illusion. It's like Darwin's theory of evolution. Everybody walks around with such an intimate knowledge of the theory of evolution, it's almost as if they think they read the book, but nobody's really read Darwin's book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you go back and read the book and you're surprised by what's in there.
And then we wonder why the Mandela effect comes in effect, because
Exactly.
most memories that we have are not from actually experiencing, it's from what we thought we experienced.
So in 1960, Hitchcock makes this film that the studios don't want to touch. You know, it's based on a book called Psycho, and the book has the contours in it that the movie has in it, but he does something really, really brilliant. He changes the main character, and the main character is based upon a real serial killer named Ed Gein that operated, I think, in Minnesota or New York, someplace back in the early 20th century, right? And he made like lampshades out of human skin, and he collected teeth, and he may have been a cannibal. By the way, Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs.
I was going to say Silence of the Lambs
is also based on Ed Gein. So what Hitch did, he did something brilliant. He cast Anthony Perkins as the serial killer, and as a physical type, he's completely the opposite of what Ed Gein was in real life. Ed Gein was a short, fat, troglodyte, creepy-looking guy. Like, he's the classic sort of serial killer as monster guy.
Right.
So Hitchcock makes him slender, non-threatening, a little bit effeminate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's this totally bland guy, as a male type. But then he gives us a movie which starts out as a film about a woman who steals $40,000 so that she can be with her lover and they can have a life in California, and that's a MacGuffin. A MacGuffin is a plot device that the movie maker puts in there, but the movie's not really about that. It's just a thing that gets things going. So in Pulp Fiction, for instance, it's whatever's in that suitcase that we never see.
Yeah.
That's the MacGuffin, right? And Quentin Tarantino was definitely doing a Hitchcock MacGuffin in that film too. That's a brilliant film. We can talk about that on a later podcast. But so Hitchcock advertises this film heavily as a Janet Leigh film because she was the star.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And then he gets audiences to agree. He does this advertising campaign where he says, "I have gotten the theater owners who are showing my film to agree that once you are seated in the theater, you will not be able to leave until the film is over, and the doors will be locked." And they filmed, like in New York, them putting chains around doors after
What?
people went in. They did.
I'm glad there wasn't a fire.
No,
because
it was all fake.
Oh.
But he got people to agree not to tell anybody what the movie was about. Do not tell anybody what this movie is about. Well, it was a smash. It was a smash, right, in 1960. And the big MacGuffin in it was Anthony Perkins had been nominated by that time for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor.
Right.
But he really wasn't that well known. He was not he was an up and coming guy, and he ruined his career making this film. Because nobody would cast him after he was Norman Bates. They're like, "I'm sorry, you're not a romantic lead anymore." The same thing happened to the guy that played Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. He didn't work again until Monk came out on TV, and he got to play Monk's the cop on Monk. That's the guy that played the killer.
Well, I think he actually got to play like a side job as a Navy SEAL instructor in G.I. Jane.
Right, but I mean, he had a hard time getting work because he was so associated with that super creepy serial killer, and his voice is so, it made me feel bad for him. In fact, when Jonathan Demme got the Oscar for the film, he actually thanked him specifically in the audience for being brave enough to take this part because everybody knew. It's like Jim Caviezel. Before Gibson cast Caviezel as Jesus Christ in The Passion of the Christ, he said, "Look, you may be ruining your career. Nobody may cast you again." That didn't happen to Jim Caviezel, but it was a real possibility. But Psycho's kind of brilliant because he advertises it really, really strongly as a Janet Leigh film, right?
Yeah.
He gives these tantalizing tidbits in the film run-up, in the trailer. He made a trailer that was showing before other movies about what the movie was about. And Hitchcock had a great sense of humor, right? And then the movie turns out to be about something that it's not what you thought it was about. It's not about a girl stealing $40,000. She gets put in the trunk of her car with the $40,000 and sunk into a swamp, right? And so at that point in the film, you're all of a sudden like, wait a minute, what is this, right?
Right.
And so again, it's all about knowledge, right? Well, flash forward to the classic John Carpenter's Halloween, right? With Jamie Lee Curtis. Well, who's Jamie Lee Curtis? Well, Jamie Lee Curtis is the daughter of Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis. And she was absolutely unknown when that film was made. So he chooses the daughter of the most famous scream queen, Janet Leigh, from the most famous slasher movie, the first one ever made probably.
Yeah.
There's an argument about that. But Janet Leigh, In one of the sequels, Janet Leigh actually appears as Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. Now Jamie Lee Curtis is back in the sequel, playing herself as the grandmother and the mother of the new victims of,
Yeah, she's only been doing that gig for what, 30 years now.
But look at,
kill your brother already, my God.
So look at what the theory of evil is in our popular culture, from Psycho to Halloween,
right,
to Friday the 13th, and to Nightmare on Elm Street. What Hitch did is he got popular culture to accept that evil is a pathology. It's a disease. It's a sickness, and it can be cured. Modern science can cure it. So at the end of every Halloween movie, you got a bald psychologist running out from somewhere saying, don't hurt him, we can take him to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Don't kill Michael Myers.
Lobotomy.
Yeah.
He don't have a brain. He got blown out, burnt, crushed, run over.
Well, I mean, it's been confused, but do you see, so evil as a pathology is the theory that we're seeing in our popular culture. We don't want to believe that evil is actually a choice that somebody makes. All the way through to all of the slasher movies, Freddy Krueger has got a background that explains why he's such a demented evil person. It's not his fault.
Yeah.
Right? So we excuse evil out of existence in all these slasher movies until we get to Scream.
Yeah.
Now, Scream completely, and Cabin in the Woods. If you guys haven't seen Cabin in the Woods, you got to see it, because it includes every trope that's used. You guys call them memes. Every trope that's used in horror films is all collected in one movie in the Cabin in the Woods. It's pretty funny. It's pretty brilliant. But when we get to Scream, what they did is they heavily advertised that film as a Drew Barrymore film. She was the only star in the film at the time. Nobody knew who Courtney Cox was.
Did she last like, what, 30 seconds?
Yeah. Well, she was offered the lead, but she had another commitment. So she said to him, I love this script so much, can you write me in? And they'd go, we'll make you the first victim. So they kind of did a Janet Leigh on her, and got us into the theaters thinking it was a Drew Barrymore movie, because Friends had just come out and was not popular yet. And I'm old enough to remember all this. Like, nobody, it was an ensemble movie. David Arquette, his sisters are famous. Who's he? At the time, he was not well known.
Right.
And then what do? They at the meta level, they unpack the whole how to at that point, slasher movies had crystallized into being morality plays. And so you get the Scooby-Doo van, and you get a bunch of kids that are unsupervised by authority, and they smoke a little dope, and if there's a black guy in the van, well, he'll disappear before they even get to the summer camp, because he had to go to the bathroom, right?
And he's usually the smartest one of the group.
Exactly.
It's the white kids that are so stupid. They keep following the monster.
If there's a blonde bombshell with large breasts who has loose morals, well, she'll be killed probably while she's having sex with the athlete, right?
Absolutely.
And then there's going to be some geekish kind of guy that nobody wants to hook up with, and he'll go after the athlete does, and then there's going to be that bookishly smart girl
who survives.
She'll be the survivor.
Alien.
You know what I mean? But this is for John Carpenter, because John Carpenter, this is a real feminist move on his part. For Jamie Lee Curtis, what he did is he reversed the fairy tale of the maiden in distress that has to be rescued by the knight in shining armor. And that's a real stroke of genius, right? He says, no, women can save themselves. She ends up being, so the hero of the slasher film are always the women.
And also, is that where Alien franchise got it from too? Because with Sigourney Weaver, I mean, that's, it was.
I think Carpenter needs to get some credit for that, because he, it was a really kind of bold move to say it's going to be a woman by her own strength, wit, grit, and intelligence that's going to be the one that's going to figure out how to survive
when all the dudes are freaking out and
when everybody else is ineffectual. But once Scream happened, we were done with that sort of horror genre, right? It's over. After that, you can't. We had I Know What You Did Last Summer, but that was a nostalgia movie. That was a movie made by a guy who remembered how much he liked Halloween and wanted to make a movie like that. So it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But then you get to the what are those films called where the people get trapped in the place, and then the guy with the mask is
the Jigsaw.
The Jigsaw movie.
Saw.
So Saw is a morality play too.
My wife loves Saw.
All right, so Saw is a morality play too, but now this generation of movie makers is starting to inch toward a concept of evil, that evil's not a disease, evil's a choice. In fact, even to the point where the victims in the Saw movies actually are choosing because they make an immoral choice, right? They're being punished, so it's still a morality play.
Right.
But they're the ones that have to become the activators of their own destruction by a choice that they make. And then we get Silence of the Lambs. And what's his name in Silence of the Lambs? Anthony Hopkins' character.
Which also,
what's the villain's name? Why am I forgetting that?
I got to plug this real quick though in there. First of all, before Season walks out, these things are awesome. Thank you. So Oh, Stealth Nutrition hooking me up on this. I'm pretty awake right now. It's not from my coffee. How's that?
It's really good. I like it.
Okay, cool. But going back to the hit the thing. Going back to the what you just said about Anthony Hopkins, Matt. That's one of the Mandela effect theories. The famous line that everyone remembers from Anthony Hopkins saying in Silence of the Lamb is, and I don't want to screw this up, but I probably will. Is what is it? What does he say? Hello, Clarice, or whatever everyone thinks he says, he doesn't say. And I was so convinced that was crap. That they're wrong.
Then you went back to.
I went back and watched it, and then I had to go back and and try to find an original version of it.
Right.
And anyway, it is kind of it's true. He didn't say that. It was another version of it. It was pretty close, but still. But anyway, Silence of the Lambs. You're saying.
So Hannibal Lecter, right? Mm-hmm. There's a moment in that movie where Clarice is in an elevator after they've put him in that gym, in that cage in that gym, so they can see him from 360. Right. And there's a deputy sheriff in the elevator with her as she's going up, and he says, "Is it true what they say about him?" And she's like, "What's that?" And he says that he's a vampire, and she doesn't answer the question. But that's some really good writing there, right? Because the vampire, there are two principles of evil that come out of way back when, and one principle of evil is the principle of the spider, evil as spider, because what spiders do is they consume the world, so that they take the whole world into themselves, and the abdomen becomes bloated. So J.R.R. Tolkien's giant spiders in Lord of the Rings, they're part of that ancient race of evil that literally want to consume the world, right? But the vampire, as evil, is the agent of evil who must seduce the victim into agreeing to their own destruction. So he's the seducer, but that's why in vampire tales, there's that old myth that a vampire can't enter your house unless you do what?
Unless you invite
him in. And it's the same thing with the devil and demonic
and the black-eyed children.
You have to invite them in.
Right.
And so when we get to the Silence of the Lambs, you're starting to see a generational shift in the idea that evil can be explained simply as a defect of nature, or as a pathology, or as a result of the way that you were treated with your kid. It's actually because Hannibal Lecter does what he does because he likes it.
It kind of makes that clear.
He's a genius. You know what I mean? He likes what he does. And so that's a shift, right?
Right.
In what evil is. And I think that one finally is, and you asked me what's the creepiest movie. The scariest movie to me still is The Exorcist. And I went back and rewatched that film after 20 years. I hadn't seen it in 20 years, and I went into it thinking to myself, this is just going to be hokey. We've seen so many of these movies since this movie was made.
Yeah.
It stands up. It's still a truly scary film.
There's something about it that, and it seems like all the because I love those type of movies. I probably should feel bad for saying that, but I do. And there's a new. Did you see the Exorcist series that started on? There's the Exorcist series now.
I didn't. I
started watching.
My television habits have all changed because I cut the cord, and now we do Netflix and we do Roku, and so I watch. Now we're watching everything binge.
Yeah.
So you kind of don't feel the urgency to go ahead and watch it. It's like, well, we'll get to that when we,
It's kind of stupid, but what it does have in it that I thought was interesting that caught me for a minute before my ADHD or whatever in movie watching went to some other thing. Because I can binge watch something for a while and I completely lose interest.
Yeah.
But was that I think towards the end of maybe the first, I don't know if it's the first season or whatever, it turns out that the woman involved in it is the girl from that movie.
Oh, okay.
That it actually is a sequel. It's a carry-on, and that was kind of creepy. But what I was saying was The Exorcist. When I watched it, because I watched it and I watched all the newer stuff. And it seems the new stuff it tries to, like they're trying to get top it with just violence and obscenity. You can't do it. There's a creepiness about that original one that.
Well, I hope filmmakers rediscover that especially in the scary movie, that sometimes not being able to see something is scarier than being able to see it.
Oh yeah.
And the what's his name that did the first Alien?
Yeah.
That movie is almost all exposition. It's all quiet, slow. And the dread that builds up by not seeing the and you can only do that once. You know what I mean? After you've seen it, but the reveal doesn't happen until the very, very. You don't see the whole thing until it's flying out of the. And I thought that was really, really brilliant.
Yeah.
But again, once you've done that, you know.
Yeah, because the second one took a whole different turn.
Yeah.
The second one was,
and by the way, the second one was that Jerry Bruckheimer or the guy who made the Titanic? It might have been him, but whoever it was, they were brilliant because they decided I'm not going to try to remake Alien. I'm going to make and it had a different flavor to it. And I thought on its own grounds it was really
not
well
James
done.
Cameron?
Yeah, James Cameron.
Titanic
he did,
right?
Titanic. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was him. So, but no, creepy movies. One of the creepiest ones I've seen recently that I had one of those responses to, like that was good, was The Strangers.
Haven't seen it.
With that, I mean, because look, Hitchcock's movie, The Psycho, is the original Wrong Turn movie. Literally, she's driving down the road, she can't see through the rain, she ends up off the main highway on this different thing, and you see the sign for Bates Motel, right? And so that becomes a thing in horror movies, is that we call them wrong turn movies, right? That's a trope. But in The Strangers, the road comes to their house. They didn't take a wrong turn. What happens is a couple gets besieged in their own home all night long, and then the scariest stuff in the movie happens in the light of day, which is to reverse everything that you're supposed to do.
What were they besieged by?
People.
Just people?
And at one point she says, "Why are you doing this to us?" And this girl in this creepy baby mask looks at her and tilts her head and says,
"Wait a minute.
Because you were home."
This the remake?
No, they're doing a sequel right now, and it's going to be hard for them to top that first one. You saw it? It's really. I haven't seen that.
That's not the one. Hold on. Okay.
It's with Steven Tyler, you know, from Aerosmith. It's with his daughter. She's the actress that plays the main female lead in it.
Well, me and Sasha, and I don't know which movie this was. We went to see this in Little Rock, and it wasn't too long ago. And it was they go to this. I don't know. It's like a trailer park. There's people walking around with masks on, and they're killing everybody. But it's kind of like the Purge, type of thing. But I didn't know if that was.
No, this one one guy has a mask that's, I think, made out of a burlap sack, and the other one has like a Halloween mask, but it looks like a baby's face. And they're obviously they're two women that are the killers and a man who's older, and they're obviously teaching the younger one how to kill. Like, it's her first time.
Right.
But they don't have conversations, they don't tell you why they're doing it. The whole movie is the tension in it is so, for the audience, it's fascinating to watch. And I thought, when I got done with that movie, I was like, that was really brilliant. Because how do you redo horror movies that have been done so well?
Right.
You know, when I was in high school, they did so many slasher movies between 1978, which is the year of Halloween, and the time I graduated high school. I was the editor of my newspaper, and I wrote a column that said, "What's next? Arbor Day?" Because they were running out of holidays. They had Halloween, Black Christmas, My Bloody Valentine, April Fool's Day, Happy Birthday to Me. You know, I don't think they had a Thanksgiving one, but, you know, it got so absurd. We had Leprechaun movies and Chucky. When a Stranger Calls. Yeah, actually, well, that's one of the original. That's the original one where the phone call's coming from inside the house, and that's what Scream was doing with Barrymore at the beginning with Barrymore. So that was their feint too.
We did. I was right. The one I was talking about was a Stranger. It was a remake. It come out in March.
Okay, I'll have to see it. I didn't know it was out.
Well, Sasha's watched them both. I don't think she liked the second one.
Yeah.
So you're probably wasting your time.
I mean, it's usually the case. That's why, you know, when I figured out that my book was actually one of three, I'm like, man, that second one's going to have to be better than the first one.
You were talking, and this movie that and I don't even know we got time. If we don't have time, like I got all the time in the world, I know you got to be places, and we're running on. I mean, it seems like nothing, but we've been going for almost 3 hours. I'm good with it, but anyway, we're on your time. But my absolute obsession movie, and I say creepy because it's not scary, but it's right. is Eyes Wide Shut. Okay, have you ever watched it? I
have. Actually, I bartended for Stanley Kubrick's nephew.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in Texas.
Yeah, my dad died right after he made this movie.
And Kenny, the night he told me, he said, "Hey, Greg, you can have." You know, we were closing down.
Yeah.
He said, "Go ahead and get yourself a beer," and he was really cool. And then I told him that one of my favorite films was 2001: Space Odyssey. And he said, "Yeah, that's my uncle." And I looked at him, and he looked just like him. I was like, "Oh my gosh, you look just like Stanley Kubrick." He's like, "Thanks, man."
We won't get into it because I don't want to get into it without your input. Because all right, and
maybe we can do it next time, and I can watch it because I have not seen that movie, and I don't remember liking it. But I absolutely detest.
You will.
Tom Cruise.
Yeah. You will not like it the first time you watch it unless you're looking for And I'll let you look into that. We won't even go into it too much, but you know, Stanley Kubrick. There's a lot of theories about what he was doing in The Shining and what he was doing this. And in this movie, Eyes Wide Shut, the going thing is that people really believe that what he was trying to do is reveal some of the stuff that you're seeing in Hollywood and in the church and all this other stuff right now. And what he's telling is a story, essentially, and you kind of miss it because you're focused on Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman.
Right, but it's all the stuff that's going on in the background.
Right, well, the character that you're not focused on that really is the heart of it is and this is kind of my input and what I take from it, is that every girl in the movie kind of looks the same. Mm-hmm. They all have red hair. They're all like Nicole Kidman. They all and it seems to be telling a story about a girl as she grows up, because Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise have a little girl who's redheaded,
right?
And she's in the beginning of the movie and she's in the movie, and that's it. And then throughout Tom Cruise's journey through this weird thing that happens to him at night, you don't really know if it happened or if it's a dream. Throughout this thing, he's exposed to women who are this just like his wife, but they're kind of different phases of life,
right?
And different things going on. And in the end of it, he ends right back with her and the little girl. And it appears like the little girl is like maybe Nicole Kidman is part of this whole thing or has been part of this whole thing.
The cycle is going to repeat.
And the cycle, and you're seeing it because at the last scene in Eyes Wide Shut that I didn't notice until someone pointed out to me is they're in a toy store, and if you don't know, like I said, you have to appreciate. You have to go back and watch the movie. But at the end of it, he's went through all this stuff. He's seen all this cultic stuff. He's seen this real weird stuff that involves women and involves sexual magic and Satanism or whatever, and it's all masked. Real weird stuff. Well, at the end of it, they're in the toy store with their little girl, and the toy store is weird. It's got like magical games and stuff. It's not like a normal toy store.
Like a magic shop.
Yeah, it's like it's almost kind of like that. And when they're leaving, or when they're the last scene, and I'm not gonna say what they say because it's pretty vulgar, but right before they say the last line, the little girl walks away from the couple, Tom Cruise, and she follows these two old men around the corner, and she kind of like disappeared, like out of the frame. And the insinuation is that she's about to start this whole. It's really anyway. I guess that's what I mean.
I'm gonna have to go back and check it out, because Kubrick is, he's one of those directors.
Yeah.
That he never makes the same film twice.
Right.
And what he does put his hands on, he does incredible work. So.
Yeah, and then of course then there's all there was 24 minutes of the movie that was apparently or allegedly, and I don't know if any of this is true, but there's allegedly there's 24 minutes of the movie that was cut that he protested before he died, and then after he died,
been added in.
That after he died got cut out, and he didn't want it cut out. And he was supposed to explain something. So anyway, it's one of those deals. But check it out, and I'm dying to hear your input on that.
I'll have to watch it again because it was so long ago that I saw it.
That needs to be I don't know if you can get on next time, but before Halloween, that needs to be our next film discussion because he knows, man. I bought this movie back in, it was 2003. I'd seen it when it came out, 2008. I hated it. And
yeah, I remember initially
everyone hated it. It was just the dumbest movie ever, right? And then someone was explaining it to me, kind of what they thought it meant. And I was in Florida, and I went to that Virgin Records was still big, and I walked in there, and because you couldn't get it anywhere because it was such a flop, right?
Right.
And I went to Virgin Records, and I walked back there, and I found it, and I bought it. I've still got that same copy, and I have watched that movie in slow motion. I have watched
it on VHS?
No, it's not on VHS. It's on DVD, but it's probably when DVD. It's not on Blu-ray.
Right.
Like it's probably when DVDs first come out.
Let me borrow it so I can watch it. For next time.
I'll get it to you. I'll get it to you.
It's probably be one of those.
I need to get on Amazon Prime anyway because it's like I'm in digital age now, but I've still got the DVD. And I told him, I said, if you want to watch it, I'll let you borrow it. If it doesn't work properly, I apologize. But
on the themes though, I think we've entered the latest craze for the horror genre. Of course, has been the virus. Oh, and this is something that I pointed out to my students about the slasher film. Why would slasher films become morality plays in the late 70s and the early 80s, where the consequences of having sex with somebody is that you die? And I pointed out that was when AIDS first appeared.
Right.
So you see, slasher films are an expression of that anxiety that we have about this new, unknown, uncontrollable. Because look at the way the serial killers are in those films. They're not normal people. They're unstoppable forces that can't die. And so I started thinking about the zombie. We've just gone through a period where zombies are just everywhere. We flirted with the vampire for a while, but then The Walking Dead, all these things. And I keep asking my students, what do you think that means? What is it that we are so afraid of that we have to express this fear through zombies? And most most people's answers, are like, well, I guess it means we're afraid of death. And I said, no, it's because we're afraid of immortality.
Right.
Because if we really are immortal, then it actually matters what we do.
Right.
And if it actually matters what we do, then we might have to change our behavior.
Yeah.
And we don't like
and
that.
This gets into what you wanted me to ask him, right?
So when we see that, when we
Okay.
see the reality of life that won't stop, we have to kill it with fire and a rake. You know what I mean?
In every movie.
In every movie, it's got to be this. It's life. That's what the zombie represents, is the force of life, not death at all. So yeah, I had a kid. I was principal of I was a bartender and a graduate student at LSU and a principal of a Catholic school all at the same time for a little while.
I love
During
the fact
period-
that you were a bartender at LSU and the principal of a Catholic school.
Yeah.
This is why I'm Catholic. I'm just letting everyone know that.
I would go from my principal job, I would change in the back of the van, and my wife
Yeah.
would drop me off at Nympha's, and I'd work at night. But during that period, I had a kid say to me at school, he said, and I wasn't Dr. Borse yet, so the kids called me Mr. Borse.
I'd have made him
And-
probably doctor anyway.
No, I wasn't there yet. And I don't even make people, I'm glad that you're calling me Greg here, because my students call me Dr.
Well, I
Borse,
introduced
know
you
what
as
I mean?
Dr. Borse.
Well, that's fine.
But I didn't know if I was supposed to say PhD.
But anyway, he said to me, hey, Mr. Borse, wouldn't it be cool if we were immortal? Because the X-Men movies were out, Spider-Man, and
Yeah.
he was thinking about all that stuff. And I said, we are. So now you better think about how you want to spend that time. He's like, oh, I see what you did there. I'm like, come on, And so to me, the whole zombie thing is the secular humanist.
Or afraid.
One of the
death.
taglines for my novel is, what if, after all, old fairy tales are true? And I grabbed that from C.S. Lewis, because C.S. Lewis was an atheist and then he converted to Anglicanism.
So I always get him another one mixed up. So C.S. Lewis was the one that was atheist.
He did the
not Tolkien.
No, Tolkien
Okay.
was Catholic, and,
Okay.
and Tolkien actually converted C.S. Lewis. He and Owen Barfield had a conversation with C.S. Lewis, and Tolkien pointed out to Lewis that Lewis loved the dying and resurrecting God whenever he met him in myth, except in the one myth where he claimed it was true. And that got C.S. Lewis thinking. He's like, you know what? He's right. I love Odin. I love Dionysus. I love the idea, of the dying and resurrecting God, the one who would, Prometheus, who
Right.
would sacrifice himself for mankind. But he says, but it's only in the story of Christ that you reject it because it makes a claim to truth. And he's like, see what you did there. So that was a seminal moment for him. But he wrote somewhere that he said, if you believers think that atheists don't have their dark moments of doubt, you are wrong. They wake up sweating, in the middle of the night thinking, if I'm wrong, that changes everything, right?
Right.
So I think part of it is we live in a really secular society, and I think that the concentration on zombies is an expression of the idea that maybe we're wrong. Maybe there is something after this.
Right.
And the defense against that, because it would demand, right?
Right.
If it's true, I had a young man come and ask me a pretty serious ethical question one time, and I looked at him and I said, "Are you sure you want me to answer that question?" And he said, "Yeah. I mean, I really want to know what you think about this. Why wouldn't I want to know?" And I said, "Because after you hear what I say, you might have to do something." He was like,
Right.
"Oh." Right?
Knowledge
And
requires action.
Yeah, that's what in
Yeah.
David Mamet's The Edge, which is one of those top 10 movies you've never seen with Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin.
That's the bear. Is that the?
Yeah, it's a bear movie.
Awesome.
Phenomenal movie. But there's one point where Bob Green, Alec Baldwin's character, says, "I don't want to know, Charles." When I show it in my film class, I'll ask my students, why is it that people don't want to know something? Why wouldn't you want to know something? And my answer to that is because if you know something, you might have to do something. And if you have to do something, you have to risk failure. So it's easier just not to know.
Right.
As long as I don't know, then I can't be held responsible for any disaster. So on the one hand, we really want to know, but on the other hand, knowledge
We don't want to.
knowledge
Responsibility.
implies responsibility. And so I think horror films are trafficking in all of these anxieties that we have about those things
Yeah.
all the time.
At least the good ones.
Yeah, I mean, well,
you said
even
the bad ones earlier, so
I think the bad ones
so
too, because it's
tell me
part of
about that, yeah.
Well, what I mean is that it's when we live in a cultural paradigm, right? And so we have a particular vocabulary for the way that we describe reality.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll put it this way: nowhere in ancient literature, except for in the Old Testament, does any character in any story ever think to ask a god why. Job's the only one. It doesn't happen in Greek myth. It doesn't happen in
And man,
Babylonian
it
myth.
didn't work out for him very well for a
No,
while.
he gets yelled at. Well,
Yeah,
God chastises those he loves.
Yeah.
God loves Job a lot, so he chastises him a lot. But it never occurs to an ancient Greek, for instance, in the Iliad, to ask why we're losing. The first assumption is we did something to piss off our God, because obviously our God is better than their God, and if he wanted us to win, we'd be winning. So at the beginning of the Iliad, Apollo himself is taken to the field and is killing the Greeks, and they have a meeting. They don't ask why this is happening. They say, what did we do wrong, right?
Right.
So there's a connection here to that knowledge thing, right? But modern science says that it's knowledge itself that will solve all of the problems. And I think what modern film does is, you'll see it in there, it's part of that. It doesn't occur to a Greek person to ask the question, why are you doing this to me, God, right? Which makes Job kind of stick out like a sore thumb. But I'll tell my students, like, before you think that those pagans are kind of nutty for believing in 17 different gods, and one for the woods, and one for the clouds, and one for the lightning, and all that stuff. I was like, if you were in the Walmart parking lot tomorrow, and you saw somebody fall down and then immediately leap up and curse gravity, God damn you, gravity, you would think that person was insane. Because science is our new religion.
Right.
Science is our new paradigm. It doesn't even occur to us to express. That's why people who don't believe in global warming are called deniers.
Yeah.
That they're denying the truth. Because you've seen
It's
this
a
on the
religion.
internet. Because science.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, science says it, so it must be true. We're the only people in the history of humankind that have ever taken that. We've transplanted our religious faith in God to ourselves. And science is that religion.
Yeah.
And we make our sacrifices. It tells us how we're supposed to behave. You know, if you care about the environment, you're not allowed to be driving around in a big old gas guzzling truck. You got to have the right car. You know, they're high priests of the religion. And so, but this is true in all societies at all times. And so that's how, even in bad movies, I'm talking about this almost in Jungian terms, like we have a collective unconscious where under the surface we have these anxieties. And I think to an extent there's something to that. And then that's why the prophets and the geniuses of their age are always rejected by society, because they're the crazy ones.
Right.
Like, you're crazy. Of course that can't be it. I'm related to the guy, Dr. Goldberger, just told this story today, who has a vitamin G is named after him. I don't even know what it's for, right? He helped cure malaria during the digging of the Panama Canal. And there was some disease in the United States. He never won a Nobel Prize, but I'm proud. I'm related to him on my mom's side. And there was a disease that was ravaging kids in the United States. And you have to understand, germ theory was not discovered until around the time of the Civil War.
Okay.
We didn't know about germs. Can you imagine how crazy somebody would say is, I have a theory that all your sicknesses are
Well, I've seen this somewhere. Like,
Right.
there was a joke about this.
They're
these
caused by
little
these
things.
tiny invisible things that you can't see. And you're like, shut up. You know what I mean?
And then
but
someone
once
thinks-
germ theory was actually confirmed, the medical paradigm changed to germ theory, and everything was caused by germs. But my great uncle, he said, I don't think that this particular condition, and I don't remember the name of the condition, but it was like impetigo. You'd get these sores on your skin, and they would ooze pus and blood, and so they quarantined people that had it. But what he noticed is that it was only happening in certain parts of the American South. There was a whole swath, right? And he kept saying to him, I don't think it's a germ. And nobody would believe him. He'd get laughed out of his medical meetings and all that stuff. So he started having what he called filth parties.
Yeah.
Where he would eat the scabs of the people that suffer from this and drink their pus and inject their blood into his veins to prove that it was not a germ. And guess what?
That is one committed dude, man.
Yeah. So guess what? He turned out to be right. It was a niacin deficiency.
And he died from it.
Yeah. No, it was a niacin deficiency. And he said if we add niacin to rice and bread, and to this day, all white bread has niacin in it. If you look in the thing, that's not natural to wheat. It's added to it because of my great-uncle that proved that a niacin deficiency will lead to this particular condition. And this particular condition doesn't exist anymore.
So why don't we still have it in their wheat?
Well, because niacin is the thing that prevents it for all of us.
I got
So
you.
because we're eating bread and we're getting, and we also put niacin in rice.
What was his name?
Huh?
Your uncle?
Goldberger. I don't remember his first name. I'd have to look him up again. But this, it's an old, one of those things like, wait, my dad told me, he's like, yeah, you're related to this really cool kind of, but, geniuses are always treated like they're completely insane. I said the other day in my class, somebody mentioned Tesla, and I said, I don't think Tesla's car company is going to last another 5 years.
Well, I mean,
it's either going to go out of business or, because it's not a real car company.
If he spends all his time smoking weed on the Joe Rogan show, he may not.
Well, but then yesterday the SEC charged him with fraud.
Really?
Like the day
for
before,
what?
I told him I don't think Tesla's going to make it. And the next day the SEC charged him.
What did they charge him? I don't understand what
because he made an announcement on Twitter that he had backing to go private with the company, and you're not allowed to do that with the Security and Exchange. You actually have to have the backing when you make a public statement about it. And there are laws that say, as a publicly traded company, you can't do what he did.
Well, let me tell you something. Little Rock is going to be really upset about this because there's like these Tesla charging stations in front of, like, you know, the Bass Pro.
I'm not saying that Tesla will go away as a car. I just think, my prediction was he's not going to make it, and the car company will probably be bought by somebody and turned into a real car company, because I don't know what it is now.
The Tesla will become a model instead of a...
Yeah, it'll,
Gotcha.
you know, or it won't be owned by him. I think he's going to get moved out, so. Anyway.
Well, yeah, well, definitely check out the Eyes Wide Shut thing, because
I will do that.
I really, I don't even care who else is coming on next time. We're gonna talk about that first and foremost, because that movie, I'll get you my copy, man. It's crazy to me, and I think it really does have a relevance with what's to me. It looks like that he's like telling us, not only is this going on, but it's almost like he's giving us a warning about what's to come. And it seems like that's what 1999. Now it's all unfolding, because you know the internet and it's kind of the Bigfoot thing. You can't keep this stuff a secret anymore.
Yeah.
You can't keep anything a secret anymore. And you know, I told my wife last night. You know, I said, you know, I don't believe in Bigfoot, and you know, and my dad would disagree with me on that. But the reason why I don't believe in Bigfoot is because if he was real, there would be like a game cam somewhere with him doing duck lips on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he would be on the show, like there would be selfies of Bigfoot everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I just don't buy it, and you know, but I just think that probably now the stuff that's coming out. I mean, we don't know how much of this stuff is coming out because of extortion of someone having video cam. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know, but
well, and also every institution, you know, every institution like the Catholic Church or like Hollywood, you know, they're their own paradigm, and they have their own borders to protect and their own secrets to keep. You know, I remember being excited mildly that Robert Redford had founded what you know became known as the Sundance Film Festival, because his reasoning was there weren't enough venues for these independent films that were being made.
Right.
And then I realized belatedly that I don't mean Robert Redford is a liar, but that's not what the Sundance Film Festival is for. It's to keep talent from being able to succeed. So like if I want to stop, let's say you're a supremely talented independent, look, you could make we're doing this right now by ourselves.
Okay. You
could literally make your own movie without having to go genuflect at the altar of
apparently
Hollywood.
Lifetime does it every day, because I mean that's sorry.
So independent filmmakers were always the rebels that were going out there and doing that, right? And Hollywood didn't like that, so they said, all right, this is what we'll do. We'll trick them into stop making the films by buying them. That is, we'll invite them to a film festival and say, we want to watch your film so that we can give you a lot of money. Well, if you want to stop that guy from doing what he's doing,
you buy it.
You buy it.
And you throw it away.
Keep your enemies close.
You put it on Lifetime Network and say it was really good.
And then you give him a job, and you completely transform him into, you're the Borg. You just absorb him into you, which means, you know, people out there are crying right now that they want to have Facebook regulated and Google regulated, and even the executives at Google and Facebook say, yeah, you know, I think we probably should be regulated. Well, as soon as they're regulated, guess what? There are no more startups to compete with Facebook, because the federal government now has regulated the opportunity for people to crack into the business right out. You know, you want to start a McDonald's, you can't just start a McDonald's. You got to pay McDonald's $1 million up front and then go get a degree from Hamburger University. I've actually been to Hamburger University.
Is that right by Disney? Is it by Disney University?
No,
my friend went to that.
No, but it's in Chicago. I went to a conference there. Beautiful campus, looks just like a college.
It really is.
It's a real. You walk into.
It's a business college.
You walk into the student. No, it's the college that franchise owners have to go to be trained to be an owner of McDonald's.
And it's all it teaches. I mean, that's it. Yeah.
So you pay $1 million, and then it takes 3 years for you to get your degree.
And those McDonald brothers got screwed.
You walk into the student center up there, and Ray Kroc's original desk and office is on a stage in the middle of the room.
Well, I saw that movie, so I know everything in that movie's true, because it always is. But those McDonald brothers, man, they got screwed over pretty bad, didn't they?
Well, I don't know. I don't
Ray
remember.
Kroc started Amway, and those guys got screwed. That's what I think happened. Because if you go to a multi-level marketing thing, man, they love some Ray Kroc. Mm-hmm. But
well, those guys were genius too. We can talk about that too. I was talking in my class the other day that, you know, the ingeniousness of fast food stretches all the way back to the Singer sewing machine. Singer sewing machine guy was the one that figured out that the money wasn't to be made in selling sewing machines, it's to be made in replacement parts. So you sell her the sewing machine, and then the salesman comes back every month because she needs another bobbin. You need, right? So interchangeable parts, right?
Yeah.
So Ford takes the idea of interchangeable parts and the assembly line, and he transforms the car company by taking Singer's idea,
right,
and doing it with automobiles. And then Kentucky Fried Chicken, Colonel Sanders convinces a bunch of people who own diners to let him. He gives them his recipe for chicken, and says, if you put my chicken on your menu and put a nickel in for every time they order my chicken instead of your chicken, I think within a year he had enough money to open his own restaurant. That's how popular his chicken was in Kentucky. And so then Ray Kroc looks at that, and he applies it to the diner and says, because this is the unique thing about McDonald's. McDonald's is brilliant because you can walk into a McDonald's in San Diego, California, and in Monticello, Arkansas.
And every one of them, the ice cream machine will be broke.
Yes.
Every one of them.
But in every single one of them, a Big Mac tastes like a Big Mac.
Yeah.
Before he did that, restaurants were like, you had to know truckers when you were taking a cross-country trip who knew which diner was the one that had the good apple pie, right? So it was word of mouth. Ray Kroc just, he applied scientific duplicatability to food. And he changed
before that,
everything about the way we eat, the way we think of food, the way we, you know.
Before that, every restaurant, and I know, and I really don't know how accurate it is, but I know in the movie, even the McDonald's restaurant, the big thing he was fighting was he couldn't get the McDonald's individual franchises of restaurants to do what he was telling them. They like, he went to one and they were serving corn dogs. Like, we don't do corn dogs here. We do.
Well, because that mentality, the old paradigm was that you were like, Sonic is kind of a throwback. There's still the duplicatability thing. They do that, but you know, the throwback of the old, the bar hop, right, is where you went to a play like Ray's, right?
Yep.
Ray's is not duplicatable. You're not going to be able to take Ray's and open it up 50 miles from here and get exactly what you get from Ray's.
Which is why it does so well in this town, because people were sick of duplicated food sometimes.
Exactly. So there's a
plug your Ray's. Plug your Ray's.
That's right. There's a theorist named Walter Benjamin that wrote a book that I think should be more influential than it is, and this is in philosophy and in theory called Art in the Age of Science, in the Age of Mechanical Reproducibility.
Yeah.
And it asks the question of whether modern people ever have any real experience of anything. Because my contention is, for instance, nobody outside of our own family has ever really heard Britney Spears sing. Because her voice that we get has been so auto-tuned and synthesized by the time we hear it.
I'm pretty sure I heard her sing one time. On the show. It is horrible.
It's that thing, you know, she can't duplicate what she sounds like on, so people don't do concerts. You know, one of the things I always loved about James Taylor is that James Taylor didn't electronically ever alter his voice.
Right.
And I went to concerts 3 different decades in a row, and that guy has perfect pitch, you know what I mean? And he does acoustic stuff, and that's really his voice. Whereas Lady Gaga, I'm not sure I've really heard her sing. I'm not sure. What is
Lady
that?
Gaga doesn't know she's
or
heard herself
Beyonce,
sing.
or, you know, all of.
She's
I'm
got
talking
so many
about
personalities.
that. So, but Walter Benjamin was talking about, you know, if you went to a Bach concert in the 18th century, 19th century, right? And it was advertised to be in Vienna, Austria, and 3 nights, right? 3 nights. How many tickets do you think people who wanted to see Bach would buy if it was advertised for 3 nights? You buy 3 tickets, 1 for each performance, because every performance is unique.
Right. Oh, I got you. Yeah, it's not.
But in the age of mechanical reproducibility, every performance is exactly
the same. Yeah.
And
we don't even really need the artist up there anymore.
Right. So he started asking, what is going to happen with art, you know, in the age of mechanical reproducibility, and then you apply that to, and we see it in the futuristic shows that are all over Netflix and the films that we watch about the future. This idea of the duplicatability, the exact copy of human beings. Right,
and we're going to talk about Westworld next time too. Yeah. You watch it?
I'm not quite caught up yet, but
I am not either, and I'm not sure I want to. I'm a little bit freaked out by the whole thing. I'm not sure if I'm real anymore.
Oh, by the way,
I'm afraid to walk through certain doors because I don't know where I'm going to end up. And
guess who created Westworld?
The devil.
Michael Crichton.
The devil.
the guy that wrote Jurassic Park. I'm
Really?
telling you, you guys. Look
Well,
up
that
like-
makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
Because it's kind of a.
I remember when it came out in the 70s. You know, it was based on a book. Hey, man. That he wrote. I didn't know Crichton had written.
Okay.
it. But they had a film of it back in the 1970s. It's pretty cheesy, but it was good. And
a version of.
Westworld was made into a film. And,
Oh, wow.
And Yul Brynner, the famous bald guy, he was the guy. He was the heavy in the film version.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. I watched it. I actually thought it was just a Western thing, you know. And
Oh.
I knew it had something to do with the future, and I knew it had something to do with people not knowing that they were whatever. But man, like, it freaked me out.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy.
Well, that's got a little bit of the touch of that goes back to the Frankenstein thing, right?
It's almost like It's almost like humans versus God in a
Yeah.
weird sense of
Yeah.
like the Matrix.
Well,
I don't know.
Blade Runner. If you guys seen Blade Runner,
I haven't seen.
Blade Runner is just
new
William
one?
K. Dick. No, the original one with Harrison Ford. But it was based on a story by William K. Dick, I think is the author's name. And the original story was called "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" But it really is just Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, right? You've got these clones that have been created to be slaves off-world. They escape and they rebel, and they're going to look for their creator to ask him a question: Why did you make me?
Yeah, for what
If
reason
you were
do I exist?
consigning me to a life of misery, all I want is what every other. There's this beautiful scene between Rutger Hauer and Harrison Ford on that roof when Hauer's character actually saves him from dying, and then they have this conversation, which actually wasn't in the original story. So you got to credit the movie makers for actually adding the scene, because it was like they got it.
Right.
They got it. And Mary Shelley's Frankenstein really is the fall from the garden in reverse. The fall from the garden is man's rejection of his creator. Frankenstein is the rejection by the creator of his creature.
I'm gonna give you my version of the fall from the garden.
Okay.
Fall from the garden is a. Adam was sitting around. I'm sorry, but I thought about this the other day. Adam was sitting around, okay, and he was watching Net Geo, because that's pretty much what the world was at that time. It was National Geographic.
Right.
It was like, you know, that's all you watched was animal shows, you know. And he was hungry, so he asked. You know, he was like, "Hey, babe, you want to go get something to eat?" She's like, "Yeah, what do you want?" He's like, "I don't know. What do you want?" She's like, "I don't know. What do you want?" He's like, "I don't know. Just go get something. I'll be fine with anything." So she gets in, she goes, she's doing what she was supposed to do. She walks around, and then she hits the drive-thru. And we all know the drive-thru is literally the devil.
Right.
And that's what she walked into, the drive-thru. And sure enough, she wanted to get the right thing, but this thing sold her on a high sugar, high fructose, you know, thing, the fruit.
Right.
And she didn't know any better, you know. And then, you know, and she ate it, and then Adam was just so happy that she picked the food out. That,
Of
you know,
course.
that's the whole reason why all this is, and that's all it was.
That reminds me, you know, when I courted my wife, we never lived together before we got married, and so when we came back from our honeymoon, we moved into my apartment, which was now our apartment, and I had no furniture. I had like one seat, I had a milk crate where the TV was on, and I had a futon.
Yeah.
I loved that because I never had to clean anything up. I had
Yeah.
a pile of clothes, I did laundry, and I didn't have to vacuum hardly any. So the very first weekend that we were back from our honeymoon, in our first week of marital bliss, she comes walking through the apartment.
Marital
living room.
bliss.
Yeah.
At the early point.
Yeah, she's walking from, you know, the doorway that goes to the bathroom and to the bedroom back on this side, across the living room, in front of the TV, toward the kitchen. And as she walks by, I'm watching Saturday football, right? And college football.
Right.
It might have been a Sunday, but as she walks by, it's like, "Hey, can you get a beer?" And without missing a beat, she said, "What are you, lame?"
Yes.
So I was like, "Really?" You know. And so I got up and I went in and I opened the refrigerator, and she was doing something, and I was like, "Would you like a beer?" She's like, "Yeah, it sounds really good." So I said, "All right, I married the right woman. She's not going to the drive-thru for me. she's let me know the first week."
Yeah.
You know.
Well, cool, man. Well,
I think we went over.
Yeah, I could go on for a while, but we won't have anything next time. So next time, I do want to talk about Westworld. We'll stay in the movie thing because that's freaky. I do want to get your intake on, or your, what I'm trying to say, your input on Eyes Wide Shut, and then we're gonna have some other guests, so I'm sure we'll have other things to talk about. But I do want to start out the next episode. If we can get you back the next time, we'll probably do another one in a week or maybe even 2 weeks. We may hold off for a week or kind of get closer to Halloween or whatever, and get you back on and pick up. That'll give you some time to see the movie.
Yeah.
And maybe several times. I'll probably watch it 50 times. I'm going to probably go home and watch it fourth kind of night because I'm, you know, and the strangers But yeah, we'll get you back on and pick up where you left off, and we'll have some of the other guys on too. So if you're
maybe by the time we do this again, I'll actually have a release date, a launch date for my book. I'm
Sweet.
hoping, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So thanks for letting me plug it. I hope you guys are interested in getting it.
So to everyone out there, Dr. Greg Borse, and he is going to be a regular co-host on the show, so we'll be seeing from him. We'll be hearing from him again and seeing him again. I want to thank you for coming out today. It's been an awesome show. I have enjoyed. Also, what is your book name? They're yelling at me. What is the book name?
It's called The Incorruptibles.
And there was two more that you're talking about.
The second one will come out later, but it's called The Resurrectionists, and the third one will be called The Apocalyptists, which is a word I actually had to coin to make the title.
Sweet. So we'll get into these things next time. Thanks for coming out. Next time we should have I think Jason Akers is going to come on and talk about some tactical stuff and maybe hit on the situation with concealed carry. So we're not just talking about this type of stuff. We're going to be talking about other things. So we'll see you guys probably in a week or two. Man, it's been awesome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm already ready to have this. I hope you enjoy the coffee.
I do.
And thanks to Stealth Nutrition for the awesome drinks, and thanks to All Time Fitness for hosting this and our set and everything. And we will see you guys later. We're going to keep the things running a while we kind of whatever. So if you're watching this, I'm going to put some music on while we kind of close things out. So we'll see you guys in a couple weeks or so.
Thank you, guys.